Hey guys, I'm gonna try something new today that I've never done before. I'm gonna try to make my own 1x12 guitar cabinet, and I wouldn't be doing this project except for I stumbled upon something that I think is actually really cool. When I was browsing through my local Cal Ranch store, I found a bee box, a deep bread box for like beekeeping, and it's made out of pine and it's unassembled, but it's got these awesome finger joints, and I took some measurements and it's about the perfect size for making a small, lightweight 1x12 guitar cab. Typically when you're looking for a raw, unfinished guitar cab body on eBay or Reverb, you're looking at spending about $90 to $100, and this thing was 20 bucks. So I have this paint grade shelving that I got at Lowe's. It's really cool. It's got some cool like finger jointed pine in there, and we're gonna make a solid pine guitar cab for total about $28 in lumber and maybe a few extra dollars in hardware. So probably looking still at probably less than a third of the price of what it would take to buy one of these. Again, I've never done this before, so come along with me and let's see what happens. So let's go ahead and open this bad boy up and do like a dry test fit before we glue it together. You can see right here we've got some discoloration from the packaging, and it looks like some stain or something dripped on there. That's weird. And we've got these handles on all sides, it looks like. So also on the one side there's a bunch of these little holes punched in. I'm not sure what that's all about. But that's going to be the inside. We're not going to see that. But the outside does have these handles. We're going to have some handles on the outside. We got a little bit of tearaway right there. I'm just going to try to hide it by doing some sanding. Now, doesn't this thing just look like it's the perfect dimensions for a 1x12 guitar cab? I think this is going to be really cool. Upon further inspection though, I did notice that some of these joints they're not very tight. So I think I'm actually going to have to screw them in order for them to hold properly while the glue dries. All right, I put in a couple of pilot screws just to kind of hold it together, and it actually looks like once I use the screws, it squared up pretty well. Okay, time to glue this bad boy, and we're using Type Bond Original Wood Glue. Any woodworker will tell you that this is the best wood glue in the history of the planet. So I'm just applying it very liberally, and then I'm gonna squeeze it in there, wipe away the excess, then screw it down so that it holds nice and square while the glue dries. All right, there we go. It's all done, ready to rock. Just kidding. Obviously this is just a cardboard baffle that I made just to make sure the proper dimensions before I cut it out of my finger jointed pine shelving board. I gotta say, I think this thing is gonna work awesome. All right, so I got my baffle cut out, and it is a nice, perfect, snug fit. The only issue is, one of the things that I thought was cool, I actually didn't even notice it when I bought it, but these bee boxes on one side, and I'm assuming it's for whatever lid you would use, you can see inside there, it's actually routed so that you can install a flush sitting lid, I'm guessing. The only problem is it's not quite routed deep enough for this particular board that I have. So this is about just a little over 1/2 inch, and this is just a little over 1/2 inch, but not quite enough. As you can see, my baffle doesn't quite sit flush with the rest of the cabinet. So I'm gonna have to route that a little bit deeper because I want it to really sit either perfectly flush or if not, even just recessed a little bit. For this job, I'm not even gonna bust out my heavy duty Craftsman plunge router. I'm just gonna use my cheap little $30 Harbor Freight trim router. All right, we got some nice flush sides right there, and this thing is starting to look pretty killer, if I say so myself. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take some scrap wood and I'm going to screw it into here so that I have a nice mounting surface for my speaker baffle, because I'm not gonna be doing a solid baffle, I'm gonna be doing a floating baffle, which just means that it's gonna be held in with screws and not with glue. I've just heard that pine cabinets sound better with a floating baffle. Again, I'm not an expert at building guitar cabs, this is my first time doing it, but that's what I've heard. And because especially this is gonna be such a small cabinet, I think I want the cabinet to be able to resonate a little bit more and kind of flex a little bit more. So we're gonna do a screw-in baffle. So let's go ahead and take our scrap wood and line the sides there, and we're just gonna screw it right there on the sides. And this will also allow for easier speaker replacement. So you can go ahead and just pull the front baffle off, replace your speaker, stick it back on, no big deal. All right, so I went ahead and did the same thing. I glued and screwed in these little mounts for the rear baffle. I don't know if the rear part is called baffle or not. Anyway, I pretty much planned from the beginning for this to be an open back cab, and I was gonna do sort of like a 3/4, 2/3, 3/4 back cab, just because I really like the tone that I get from my Black Star, which is a 3/4. And then I realized, you know what? I've got a couple extra pieces of scrap wood, so I thought maybe I would just cut these, and we can screw these in here like this, and then we can choose if we want to have it be a fully closed back, or if we want it to be a semi-open back or an open back cab, just depending on whether or not we put these in there or not. So I think that's kind of cool. All right, so now I am going to route out a spot where I can put in my 1/4 inch jacks. I'm gonna do 4 1/4 inch jacks, and I'll explain the wiring that I plan to do in a little bit, but I'm just gonna freehand route it again with my little Harbor Freight trim router. Okay, so our cabinet is all built except for I need to cut a perfect circle in there to fit my speaker. And speaking of speaker, this is an Eminence Lil Texas, or Lil Texas. And this is a super lightweight neodymium magnet speaker, and it has incredible mid-range. I love the mid-range on this. I felt like it was probably a little bit too warm for my taste in the very large open back maple cabinet that I had. So I'm excited to see how it's gonna sound in a closed back pine cabinet that's much smaller. So I'm hoping that it might help calm the mids a little bit and kind of even it out, add a little bit more bass, a little bit more high end. We will of course see once it's all finished. But I need to figure out how to cut a perfect 11-inch circle in here. It's a 12-inch speaker, but the hole needs to be 11 inches. And I have an idea for a jig that I think will help me route a perfect circle. So I'm gonna go ahead and give it a shot, and if it works, I'll explain exactly what I did. So what I did here is I just measured the perfect center of my baffle and drilled a small hole where I can stick in a bolt. Then on a piece of scrap wood, I went ahead and drilled the same hole in the exact center, and then marked out a 5.5-inch radius to make an 11-inch overall circle. Then I drilled a hole in that spot as well for my router to plunge into. Next, I bolted through the center of the scrap wood into the center of the baffle with some washers so that I could get a nice pivoting motion. Lastly, I attached my router by screwing the base in right above that hole that I made for my router to plunge into. And now I can pivot around in a perfect 11-inch circle. I did one shallow pass first just to make sure that I was on the right track and making a perfect circle. Then I went back a little bit deeper, but still not all the way through. Lastly, now that that trench is deep enough, I came back with my trim router, which already had my ball bearing bit installed, and went all the way around one last pass, and the center dropped free, and I was left with a perfectly round 11-inch circle. Then to tidy it up, I went around one more time with a 3/8-inch roundover bit just to give it a nice finished look. I did a test fit with my speaker to make sure it was the right size, and perfect. Now before I did all my finish sanding, I went ahead and used some wood filler to fill in the tear out on all of the handles, and I cut out some barbecue skewers to use to fill in the screws that I used when I was gluing this thing together. I went ahead and glued and hammered those in, and then topped it off with some wood filler as well. Now I'm using my favorite tool besides my Dremel, which is my orbital sander. If you hate sanding as much as I do, you definitely need to invest in one of these guys. Of course, they don't reach every single little nook and crevice, so some hand sanding is required, unfortunately. Lastly, I went around all the edges with my router in a large roundover bit to give it a really nice finished look. You know, the other day my wife asked me why I don't do my custom engravings anymore, and that's a really good question. I don't know. I haven't done it in a while. So I decided after I was done rounding off all the corners and doing my finish sanding, I pulled out the baffle and decided to do a custom engraving on it. I did it the same way I always do, just by sketching out a design in pencil and then tracing out that design using a Dremel with a flex shaft kit and an engraving bit. Now I'm about 4 cups of coffee into this project, and I gotta say, it's coming along exactly as planned. I am shocked. I haven't really run into any major snags at all. Now, a lot of you guys ask what kind of coffee I'm drinking whenever I'm drinking coffee in my videos, and typically the answer is the cheapest stuff that you can get in Costco because of the sheer amount of coffee that I drink. But today I'm drinking something a little different. One of my viewers, Jeffrey Allen, sent me this Jamaican High Mountain Coffee. He just knew that I was a coffee fan, and he has a website called Allen Trading Company where they sell this coffee. And he decided to just send me a couple of bags just because he knew I liked coffee, like not because he wanted a shout out or a sponsorship or anything. He's just being a real bro. And so this video is not sponsored by Allen Trading Company, but I am going to put a link down in the description for you guys because it is really good coffee and I'm really enjoying it. And in fact, I actually had a different color scheme in mind for this. I was going to do Minwax True Black on the body and Classic Gray on the front just because I love that black and gray color scheme. But in honor of this Jamaican High Mountain Coffee that I got from Allen Trading Company, I actually decided to do it Minwax Espresso color. Now, I went ahead and did the entire front baffle in espresso first because I really wanted to fill in where those engravings were. And then now I'm actually going to sand it back and stain it a different color so we get a nice contrast between the espresso sides. And then we're going to do some golden oak there on the front. Like I mentioned before, I'm wiring this thing up with 4 1/4-inch input jacks, and the way I'm wiring it is so that you can run just this single cab by itself at 8 ohms, it's an 8 ohm speaker, or you can attach an additional 8 ohm cab either in parallel for a total load of 4 ohms, or in series for a total load of 16 ohms. This is going to give us the ultimate in versatility because you can choose between running at 4, 8, or 16 ohms depending on if and how you connect an additional 8 ohm speaker. To wire it up, I'm just using wire from this old speaker cable that I have. It's important that you're using speaker cable and not regular hookup wire because we are working with amplified signal here. Unlike wiring up guitar pickups, this actually needs to be a thick gauge wire that can handle the wattage that we're going to be sending through it. To connect the wire to the input jacks, I of course am soldering it, but for the speaker side, I'm actually just going to crimp on some of these quick connects and of course label it positive and negative so I can keep them straight when I'm swapping out a speaker. And if you guys are interested in seeing my exact wiring diagram, that's always available to my Patreons over at patreon.com/Dan Thompson. For my speaker grill cloth, I use this brown burlap that I found in the remnant section of my local craft shop, and I'm just stretching it out and stapling it down. Then I'm reinforcing the staples with liquid super glue just because I know staples tend to wreak havoc on cloth over time. This is just going to add a little bit of extra strength and security. Then I can trim off the excess and add a few more staples. Why the heck not? Now I'm ready to mount my speaker, install my quick connects, and screw my baffle down, and we are pretty much done here. The last thing I'm going to do is install some cheap hardware that I got on Amazon to give it a more finished and professional look, like those corner protectors, a handle, and some feet for it to sit on. So obviously when it's all said and done, I'm going to want to put some kind of finish on this, but I left it raw as of now because I wanted to hear how it sounds because that's going to determine what kind of finish I put on it. If I like the way it sounds raw, then I'll do like a softer oil finish like tung oil, like you guys know that I love. Or if I want it to be a bit brighter, I'll add like a really thick polyurethane or a lacquer or something like that. But let's go ahead and see how this thing sounds. Cool. Definitely sounds a lot brighter than it did in my old cab, so that's exactly what I was going for. Sounds a little bit bassier too. Alright, so I haven't changed any settings on my amp or my guitar or anything, and the only thing that I changed is I took off these rear slats. I gotta say, it's definitely a lot warmer when it's an open back. and it's actually even bassier as an open back too. I thought there'd be more low end with it closed up, but it actually seems a bit boomier with it being an open back, but it's kind of cool. Still a good tone. I think I like it closed up better, so I'm gonna close it up and have a little bit more fun. Gosh, I did not think this thing would sound so good. Sealing it up like a closed back is really cool. The high end is really crispy, so you get just a bunch of that really cool, like rich harmonic. Gosh, it's so cool. Anyway, if you're interested in all these awesome budget tube amps that I have over here, I'm actually going to be doing a video next week on the best budget tube amp shootout. Hit the subscribe button, and I'm going to be demoing them all through my new favorite cab, this one that I built right here. Awesome. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you next week.